I have a mix I finished recently, or so I thought. It sounds great on my headphones and my studio monitors, but when I play it on my phone, it doesn't sound great, especially when I listen to it compared to my reference tracks. And obviously I want my track to sound great everywhere. So I thought I'd take this video as an opportunity to both fix my mix and to talk to you about something I haven't covered on this channel before, mid-range. So as music producers, it's quite tempting to focus on the low end and the high end because that's where we think the power and the sizzle and the punch comes from. They're kind of the most exciting parts for our ears. What tends to happen though, when we focus on the lows and the highs predominantly, we can end up with mixes that end up too boomy in the low end and overcooked and too crunchy in the top end. So they sound great on our studio system, but as soon as we take that out into the real world, there's always something that we just don't like about it. Now for sure, the highs and lows are essential and we will be getting to them in a couple of minutes, but by fixating only on those, we miss the part that everybody hears and everyone responds to the most, which is, you guessed it, the mid-range. So I'm going to fix my mix and we'll compare it to the original, but firstly, what is mid-range and why is it so important? Well, it's technically the frequencies between about 300 Hz and about 4 kHz, which is 4000 Hz. Now, some audio pedants might argue over the exact frequency range and it doesn't really matter, but what does matter is these three things. 1. Human ears are most receptive in this range. That's why a crying baby sounds so noticeable. 2. Most instruments that we use in our mixes have information in this range. This means balancing all of these elements is super important. If you imagine taking a family photo and you've got people who are like 3 feet tall, from the little kids up to 6-foot adults, and grannies sat in their chairs, in that photo we need to make sure that everyone's face is visible and that the composition is just right to fit everyone in. And it's the same with our mid-range mix. We've got a lot of instruments and a lot going on there, so we need to make sure that we balance that composition well. And the third point is that all loudspeakers cover this range. Yes, on our studio headphones and on our studio monitors, we might be able to hear down to 30 Hz all the way up to 20 kHz. But the truth of the matter is most systems don't reach anywhere near those levels, especially when we're talking about smartphones and cheap stereo systems, which is where most people are going to be hearing the music. So what's the problem? Well, the difficulty lies in our ears focusing on the mid-range, because it's so easy to get distracted by the super lows and the super highs and the stereo field as well. So as mixing engineers, what we want to do is make it as easy as possible for our ears just to focus on the mid-range. Now the classic way of doing that is to have various sets of studio monitors that you can switch between and have a pair that just focuses on the mid-range. 2 sets of monitors that will do exactly that are the Auratone 5Cs and the classic Yamaha NS10s, which they discontinued in 2001, but now you can get their HS series, which does a similar job. But what if you don't have multiple sets of monitors and you've got no intention of buying more? Well, we still need to focus our ears on the mid-range only, and I'm going to show you how to do that whilst I fix this mix. Think of it like having a conversation with a person in a busy, noisy room. If you could just isolate that one person, it would be much easier to concentrate on what they're saying. So let's do the mix equivalent of that now. I'm going to attempt to fix my mix by focusing on the mid-range. I'll show you every step along the way and then we'll see if it actually works. Okay, so this is the mix we have it as it stands. So it's a nice little idea, but I just wanted to punch more in that mid-range. So we're going to make that happen, but first I'm going to walk you through this project setup and we can see how it's going to work. So first, I've created an audio track and I've put a reference track on there. Now this reference track is in the same genre I am producing in, and this is really important because to mix without any sort of reference is just very hard for your ears to maintain objectivity. So that's the first thing I've done. Next thing I've done is set that output to external out, which just means that this reference track is going to bypass our master channel because we don't want the mastering effects to apply to our reference track because it's already been mastered. Okay, next we have set up our normal mix. We've got all our channels and they're all running to our master bus or our mix bus, depending on what you want to call it. And then there's a few plugins we need to make sure are in place so we can do this mid-range mix. So we go back to our reference track and we can see that there is a utility plugin on there, which is just a gain or trim plugin, and it's taking our reference track down by 12 decibels. I've also got a switch to switch the whole thing to mono, and I've set up a keyboard shortcut to switch that on and off. Now, if we go over to our master channel, you'll see I also have another mono switch triggered with the exact same key. So both of them switch to either mono or stereo at the same time. Now, the reason we're doing this is because not only are we going to focus our ears on the mid-range, we also want to take out the confusion of the stereo field. So if we can listen to it in mono, it's going to allow us to balance those levels and frequencies much easier. Now, I've reduced the reference track by 12 decibels because remember, the reference track has already been mastered. Our track is just in the mixing stage. If we try to mix our track to be comparable to the reference track without dropping it down by about 12 dBs, we're going to very quickly run into clipping issues on the master channel. So that's why I've done that. Next, in our plugin chain, I've got an EQ. Now, we'll open this up. You don't need to use the Pro Q3, but I really like it, so that's what I'm using. And what we've done is we've put a low cut filter here at about 200 Hertz with an 18 decibel curve. And then we put another one in the high end at 4000 Hertz, again with an 18 decibel curve. So this is going to be giving us our mid-range. So let's have a listen to that. And this is with it off. So we can hear it really is focusing on the mid-range. So this is the reference track. We want this exact same Pro Q3 setting on our master channel, which if we open it up here, we'll see we have. And then the next thing I'm going to do, much like the mono switch, I'm going to set up a keyboard shortcut to switch both of those on or off at the same time, because the key is we want to be switching out and using these as tools. We don't want to do the whole mix, focusing just on the mid-range. Turn your phones off, guys and girls. Because, as I was saying, we don't want to do the entire mix either in mono or just listening to the mid-range, because we'll lose scope, we'll lose objectivity. It's just tools there that we can switch on or off. Kind of like having a spotlight that you can shine on a particular part of your painting just when you want to focus on it, and then turn it off when you want to look at the whole picture. So let's set up a keyboard shortcut for these mid-range EQs as well. I'm just going to choose Option J because it's just above my Option M, which is my mono switch. Now we need to go back to our master channel and make sure we've got the exact same shortcut set up there as well. Option J, boom. So now we can switch it between full range and mid-range. Lovely, so that's the setup. Next thing I want to do is set our kick to be peaking at 12 decibels or minus 12 decibels. And I'll explain that to you in a second as well. So we can hear it's just the mid-range. This is the full kick with the bass and the high end. And that's just the mid-range kick. But we want to make sure that this is peaking at about minus 12. It doesn't have to be super accurate, but if we can see here, and if we leave our kick set to minus 12 dB, it means that we have got plenty of room on our mix bus or our master channel, so we're not going to run into clipping, and also it's going to be a comparable level to our reference track. So that's why I set the kick to this level. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is use my top-down mixing approach, and that just means mixing each element into this kick in order of importance. Now, usually it's going to be the bass line that's the most important thing after the kick, especially with electronic dance music. So let's just mix the bass in to sound at a good level with this kick. But of course I need to take all of the volumes apart from the kick down to 0 because we're starting this mix again from scratch, and then the drums as well, let's just take them down to 0. Okay, so now we've got mid-range mode selected, we've got mono selected, and let's just bring in the bass until it's sounding good. Oh, there's one other plugin I forgot to tell you about. We've also got a spectrum analyzer here, and that's so we can compare our track to our reference track in terms of frequency spread, so we can visually check our mix. Now, you need to do it by ear. This is just a way to check to see if you're a million miles away or not. Especially with mid-range mixing, doing it by ear is particularly useful. Okay, so let's loop the busiest part of the track and do this mix. Next bass. So I just need to make sure that all of this is balanced before I move on to anything else. And again, I can switch to my reference track and check. So that's going to help me judge. Next most important thing is going to be the main clap or snare. I just want a similar energy as the reference track. Next, the main hats. which I think would be the 16th hat. And the shakers. And the next most important thing is really going to be in this track, I think. Let's have a listen. It's probably going to be that organ stab going boom. So let's mix that in next. You could also have a keyboard shortcut to switch to solo as well, to be quicker. Now, I can hear something here. If we switch to the reference track, I'm going to focus on taking out some more of the high ends of this stab because it sounds in the reference track that it's a bit more mid-rangey. So let's just take out some of those. So now we've got that kind of sound. Sounds a bit more techno-y. And then we've got wong, 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 syncopated synth underneath. I don't like the reverb on that, too much reverb. Tightening up a bit. Again, we'll take out some high end. All of this would be really hard for my ears to pick up on if we weren't using this mid-range filter on our mix. So let's just save that and continue. Now, I've used a particularly stripped back part of the reference track to do this mix, but now we've got more elements that we need to mix in as well. So I'm going to find a busier part of the reference track to use. With lots of synths going on. So now I'm going to copy that back over to our loop. And then I'm going to mix in our other synth elements. So we've got that do-do-do-do-do synth. So let's get our equivalent synth, which would be, I think, over here. And I'm just going to hear if there's a similar energy in that area of the frequency range. Sounding pretty good. And then we can also check the frequency spread visually as well. So the left-hand one is the reference track. And on the right, we've got our track. And we can see it's not bad, but there's some more mid-frequencies there. And I think it's because we haven't put these other synths in yet. So we can see that's filling up some of those frequencies now. And then we've got this Hans Zimmer horn as well. And let's just focus on these beats again, just to double check. Let's turn off the horn. And I can hear there's a string in there going, Mom. So I could decide to add that to our track. It doesn't just have to be on the mixing process. You can use this in the production stage as well. So I'm going to add a string now. I think I hadn't planned to do this, but you know, we're just going to follow the actual. I wanted to do this live and actually see if it did make it better. So we've got some strings. Let's just double check. And then we can program that in. Make it a bit quieter. There we go. Let's just extend it and let's mix this in and compare it to our reference track. Sounding pretty good. So So with all that being said, let's play the track and see if it's made it any better. And this is full frequencies and back to stereo. And let's just check the frequency spread. That's full frequency spread. That's our reference track. And this is our track. So we can see our mid-range is looking pretty good now. So now let's compare those two mixes and see if we've made it any better. So I think the second one sounds way better. More clarity and power in the mids, and funnily enough, more power and clarity in the lows and the highs as well. Now we've got the mid-range sounding great, so we know it will translate onto the majority of systems, but it's electronic dance music we're making, so we need to make sure that low end is absolutely rock solid, because it's going to be played on big systems at clubs and festivals. Systems that can go down as low as 20 Hz. And unless you've got a damn good setup in your studio, you probably won't be able to hear down to that range, especially in a way that's going to complement your mid-range. Thankfully, I put together some steps on how you can do that in your home studio in this video right here, which will ensure that your kick and bass fits perfectly together and give you a rock solid low end that will sound amazing on big systems. But before you head over there, let me know in the comments below if you're going to try out this mid-range mixing technique, and throw me a like if you found it useful. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you over at that next video where we are going to nail your low end once and for all. Catch you over there.